I'm, as the slide said, as Julian said, and to confirm, I'm Gareth Cooke, the Education Training Manager at the Faculty of Public Health. And I'm just going to give you an oversight of the portfolio, the processes involved, and a couple of kind of salient points. Suffice to say, I won't be drowning you in detail. The portfolio is a system you will get to know intimately over the next couple of years. So I will just, provide you with that overview of how it actually works. As I said, I'm part of the education training team. There's myself and 4 other colleagues, and we cover various things that are education and training related, unsurprisingly, including registration onto the training scheme. So we will ensure that you're enrolled, and we'll send out your details for the portfolio once you've enrolled with us. I think we've nearly got everybody, like Pokemon, we've nearly caught them all, but I think we might have 1 or 2 people outstanding. So if you haven't enrolled yet, please do. And then we can give you access to the e-portfolio. Along with the registration onto the training scheme, we also deliver the diplomate and final membership exams. Julian, could you actually move on to the next slide? Thank you. As I say, diplomate and final membership exams. We provide support for the development committees for those exams, whose job it is to, ensure that the exams the faculty deliver are to the highest standard and meet all the requirements of our regulators. We're also responsible for the setting of exams, organising and managing logistics in the run-up and on the day of the exam as well. We're also responsible for the processing of applications and providing support for registrars in the kind of run-up to the exams as well. At the end of your training, you'll be applying for your CCT, your Certificate of Completion of Training. We make a recommendation to our regulators, the UKPHR or the GMC. Once again, something that the education training team are responsible for. And the final kind of areas that we deal with is a more kind of broader administrative processes around things, as Fatai's described, the FBH projects, the nationally available training placements, and out of program applications. So, and that also brings us nicely up to the e-portfolio. Every Royal College and faculty, or I believe every, the majority of them will have an e-portfolio system, and it provides specialty registrars with a central platform for the documentation on progression of learning against the public health specialty training curriculum during your time training. In other words, it's a way for you to manage signing off the learning outcomes described in the public health training curriculum. So here you can see a kind of a diagram of how that process works, and I will just kind of describe those steps for that. The first thing you'll do with a new piece of work is to upload evidence onto the system. You'll see that then we link the evidence to an activity, and then the next stage is to link that activity and evidence to a learning outcome. The activity is then submitted for sign-off by your project or activity supervisor, and once that's signed off, the associated learning outcome with that activity will then become available for submission for sign-off. So it's signing off the activity comes before signing off the losses or the learning outcome sign-off sheets. All learning outcome sign-off sheets are connected to an ARCP, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail, but this is your annual review of competency progression. So a panel meets annually to review the work you've submitted over a set period of time and to ensure that you're progressing through training as they would expect, or to highlight any potential need for further support. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Julian? Thank you. Evidence is uploaded as part of the sign-off process for learning outcomes, as I've described. You should remember that the evidence you upload shouldn't have confidential or sensitive information contained, and if it does, it should be redacted. Yeah, you should, so ensure any documents and information uploaded is suitable for the portfolio and for the panel to see. Your training program director or your educational supervisor should be able to advise you on those appropriate pieces of evidence. As you can see here, once you create a piece of evidence, it's listed on the system. You can filter this list in many different ways under evidence names, the date it's added, or you can use the search function there to find specific pieces. When creating evidence, a reminder to please avoid using non-alphanumeric symbols in the naming of evidence. I had to Google what that was, but that includes things like underscores. There shouldn't be any underscores in your titles. There shouldn't be any colons or semicolons, or something called pipe, which I don't know what that is, but don't use pipe. Can we move on then to the next slide, please, Julian? Again, it's a very similar kind of looking dashboard for activities here. As before, you can kind of filter this page by activity name, the type. You'll see that there's a pre-planning activity sheet as well that can be selected for approval. This is a standalone document and doesn't link to any learning outcomes or anything like that. You'll see there we have status, and that's open, in progress, and approved. Approved means that you've submitted the activity to your supervisor who has approved it. Obviously, the alternative there would be rejected. In progress means that you've created an activity and you've submitted that to your supervisor, but they've not yet actioned that. And then there's open, which means you've created an activity, but you have yet to submit that for sign off. So you could still edit that. You could still attach new pieces of evidence to that if you wished. When you're creating activities, as I said, you will associate that with learning outcomes. If they're not associated to a learning outcome, in essence, your losses are your learning outcomes summary sheet will be blank and you won't be able to submit those. So you must remember to associate learning outcomes to an activity. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Julian? And here's some of the learning activities. Learning outcomes even. We currently, I believe, just have under 100 learning outcomes in the curriculum. That does sound like an impressive amount, but we did reduce that in the last curriculum review, and we will probably see a further reduction of those with the new curriculum introduced next year. It is worth noting that you can submit one piece of evidence on one activity that covers numerous learning outcomes. So you don't necessarily have to submit a corresponding activity and evidence for each of these. But this is something that through discussion with your educational supervisor and your training program director, they'll be able to take you through that and the expectation around what evidence should be submitted and how the sign-off process will work in practicality. Okay, can we move on to the next slide, please? The ARCP, this are a way to group together work over a period of time. As you can see here, you enter an ARCP date, there's the from date, and there's a cutoff date. You will not be able to submit any further evidence, sign-off activities or LOSOS within, I think it's, there it says on there, 2 weeks prior to the ARCP date on that. You'll notice there it's got a status of open as well. So in the run-up to your ARCP, as you sign off items, they'll all become clustered together under that. And what you would see on the actual page is a list underneath this, these fields, which just details the learning outcomes, the activities, and the evidence associated with that. When the training panel meets, they have access to the e-portfolio and their own ARCP panel access, and they can see everyone in their region. They can select registrars in that region and kind of drill down into their ARCPs that are listed. So they'll be able to see not only the learning outcomes signed off, but the evidence and the activities associated with that as well. Some deaneries ask for very specific documents to be uploaded as part of this process as well. It varies, it seems, from region to region, so you should check with your training program director or your educational supervisor about any particular paperwork that's uploaded as part of that process. When the date of the ARCP is reached, the ARCP will automatically change to closed, and you'll need to open a new ARCP, add a new entry on the system. If you don't, you will not be able to submit learning outcomes. So you can have activities signed off, but when you go to submit a learning outcome sign-off sheet, you'll get a prompt that just reminds you that you need to open a new ARCP. You should only have one ARCP open at any one point. If you have multiple open, it can lead to some confusion with items being associated with the wrong ARCP. So when the panel meets, it isn't clear what work has actually been completed in which ARCP. The education and training team, we're able to support people with all kinds of queries, obviously, on the system, and we're able to kind of unlock ARCPs that are closed, send back items such as activities that have been submitted for sign-off and loss that have been submitted for sign-off as well. So we are able to kind of manually override, manually open things. So it is possible, if you do need our help, you could end up with more than one ARCP open, but I'm sure we would remind you that you need to just have one open at any given moment. What we've not covered on the slides, but is useful just to mention as well, is the My Profile page. On that page, you'll be able to select your educational supervisor. If you select your educational supervisor on the system, they will be able to then, when they log into their account, see a list of those registrars who have created that link, and then view their ARCPs, and once again view all the work associated with the ARCP, so the loss, the activities and the evidence. So through the My Profile page, you need to select your supervisor there in order to create that relationship. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Julie? As you can see here, there is a user manual available once you've logged into the system. It's downloadable as a Word document there. And we've included 2 links here to demos, YouTube videos made by other registrars who basically run through the steps of how to sign off, submit items and upload evidence and sign off learning outcomes. They're very clear and very useful, and more importantly, very brief as well. I don't think either of them is longer than 10 minutes. Could we move on to the next? This sort of things to remember with the equal find is there to kind of store documents on. As good registrars should be creating backup copies of any evidence that's uploaded onto them. Yeah, just as good. You should say using it there as a kind of storage facility. It's super for you to have or to sign off activities or loss. If you can't see them on the list, then potentially they need to be added to the system. In those cases, we ask that if you contact us on this email address here, that you copy in your deanery, or perhaps even ask your deanery to contact us directly about adding people to the system. It's just a bit of due process there to ensure that the correct people are being added with the correct user access onto the system. And in regards to ARCPs, I would advise as well regularly kind of just taking a look at your ARCP, opening those up and seeing what's associated, making sure everything is where you expect it to be. managing that kind of process or keeping an eye on that in the run up to an ARCP is just a good way to avoid a last minute panic. We do get registrars who will contact the education and training team a few days before their ARCP panel, and when they've realised that nothing's associated to the correct ARCP. As I said before, it's easy for us to kind of amend ARCPs and move things around, so it's never a problem. But just to avoid panic, it's probably best just to keep an eye on that as you progress through training and you approach the ARCP date. As you can see here, these are some resources for support. The education training team can be contacted via email there. Our phone numbers are all on the website as well. Everybody in the education and training team will be able to answer your queries on the portfolio. So so anybody in the team there will be able to help if you do have a problem. And the other resource available is ePortfolio Champions. These are regional reps who attend a semi-regular meeting with the faculty and feedback on any kind of items, difficulties with the system, anything, or just any problems that they might be having with the system. And it's as I say, another resource for registrars to contact for support if they're having difficulties with the portfolio. Yes, that brings me to the end. These slides, I take it, will be circulated to everybody, so you'll be able to kind of have access to those resources and the obviously the education email there. But if anybody does have any specific questions about ePortfolio, more than welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to kind of have a conversation or answer those by email for you. But thank you.